William James, who lived from 1842 to 1910, was an American philosopher and psychologist widely considered to be one of the most influential thinkers in the development of modern psychology. He is often referred to as the father of American psychology, and, his ideas really laid the groundwork for both functionalism in psychology and the philosophical school of pragmatism. James was an advocate for the study of the mind as it functions in the real world, focusing not on abstract mental processes but on how consciousness helps people adapt to their environment. William James was born into a prominent intellectual family. His father, Henry James Sr., was a philosopher, and his brother, Henry James, became a famous novelist. James himself was initially educated as a scientist and a philosopher, and he was drawn to psychology after studying physiology and medicine. Although he struggled with mental health issues, including depression, his intellectual pursuits in the field of psychology and philosophy were driven by a deep curiosity about the human experience, particularly consciousness, perception, and the nature of knowledge. William James is often associated with the school of functionalism, which emphasized understanding the mind in terms of its practical functions in adapting to the environment. Functionalism was a reaction against structuralism, which sought to analyze the mind in terms of its individual components, focusing on introspection and understanding consciousness as a set of parts. James believed that psychology should focus on how mental processes like perception, memory, and decision-making help individuals adapt to their environment. In his view, the mind is not just a passive receiver of information but a dynamic, active entity that helps organisms function in the world. In his seminal work, The Principles of Psychology, published in 1890, James laid out many ideas that are still central to psychological theory today, such as the concept of stream of consciousness. He suggested that consciousness is a flowing, ever-changing process, rather than a static set of mental states or contents. This idea was, honestly, pretty revolutionary because it rejected the notion that the mind could be neatly compartmentalized into discrete analyzable parts. One of James's most famous ideas is his concept of the stream of consciousness. He argued that consciousness is not a series of isolated thoughts or perceptions, but a continuous flow. This stream of consciousness is constantly shifting, allowing people to react to stimuli, reflect on the past, and plan for the future all at the same time. The stream of consciousness idea has had a lasting influence on literature and psychology. Writers like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce later adopted this concept in their works to depict the continuous flow of thoughts and experiences. In psychology, James's work laid the foundation for later theories of cognitive psychology, which focus on the mental processes involved in perceiving and interpreting the world. Another major contribution of mine was the James Lange theory of emotion, which, was one of the earliest attempts to understand the physiological basis of emotions. According to this theory, emotions are the result of physiological changes that occur in response to external stimuli, rather than the other way around. For example, when a person sees a snake, they might experience physical changes such as increased heart rate, muscle tension, and rapid breathing. According to the James Lange theory, these physiological changes are what the person recognizes as the emotion, fear. In other words, the body's response comes first, and the emotion is the interpretation of that bodily response. This theory was groundbreaking because it suggested that emotions are not simply abstract mental states, but are directly tied to the body's physical responses. While this theory has been modified over time, it was an early step in understanding the physiological foundations of emotions and paved the way for later research in emotion theory. Beyond my work in psychology, I was also a major figure in philosophy, particularly in the development of the pragmatic tradition. Pragmatism is a philosophical approach that focuses on the practical consequences of ideas and concepts, arguing that the truth of an idea is measured by its usefulness in real-world situations. In his famous lecture series, which was later published as Pragmatism, a New Name for Some Old Ways of Thinking, back in 1907, James outlined the core principles of pragmatism. He argued that, people really shouldn't get caught up in abstract theories or concepts, but instead, they ought to evaluate ideas based on how well they actually work in practice. For example, when dealing with a problem or an idea, James believed that the truth should be tested by its practical implications. If an idea leads to successful outcomes in real-life situations, it can be considered true. This approach, honestly, stands in contrast to those more traditional philosophical approaches that were always searching for objective, absolute truths. Pragmatism also emphasizes experiential knowledge over theoretical knowledge, suggesting that our understanding of the world should really be grounded in real-world experiences and consequences. This was a major shift in philosophy, moving away from idealism and toward a much more action-oriented approach to understanding human experience. Another key aspect of James's philosophical work is his concept of the will to believe. In his 1896 essay of the same name, James argued that belief isn't always the result of objective evidence. In some situations, people just have to make a willful decision to believe in something, even when there's no concrete proof. James was particularly concerned with religious belief. He believed that faith could be justified by its pragmatic value. If belief in something brought meaning or purpose to a person's life, it could be considered valid, even if there was no empirical evidence to support it. This view was definitely controversial, especially in the context of scientific inquiry, but it's had a lasting influence on discussions about the relationship between belief, faith, and evidence. Perhaps William James's most influential work is The Principles of Psychology, published way back in 1890. This two-volume work is considered a foundational text in the field of psychology and honestly, a cornerstone of functionalist psychology. In it, James addresses a wide range of topics, including consciousness and perception. Expanding on the stream of consciousness, he explored how we perceive the world and how our mental processes help us adapt. Habit and willpower were also big interests for James. He really wanted to understand how habits form and how individuals can cultivate self-discipline. When it comes to attention and memory, he offered groundbreaking insights into how we focus attention and how memory works, which, influenced a lot of later psychological research. And then there's the self. James explored the concept of the self, including the self as known, our concept of who we are, and the self as knower, which is our ability to reflect on ourselves. William James's work continues to shape both psychology and philosophy today. His focus on pragmatism has influenced areas such as education, political theory, and ethics. In psychology, his emphasis on understanding the practical, adaptive aspects of the mind laid the foundation for later schools of thought, including behaviorism, cognitive psychology, and humanistic psychology. James's influence can also be seen in modern cognitive neuroscience and positive psychology, where there's an ongoing focus on understanding how consciousness, emotions, and mental processes contribute to human well-being and adaptation.